I like the way this patent application structured its drawings. Drawings are very important, and what this author did was create a series of sequential drawings that show different steps in the process. That is quite often, and maybe almost always, a very helpful way to articulate an invention to the audience. You have to remember when you're drafting one of these, the purpose of the application is not to convince yourself that you've described your invention. It's to convince an audience who has never talked with you, never seen this before, not to convince them, but to convey to them what the invention is. And so it's the reader's perspective, not the author's perspective. One concern that may be relevant here is I've seen people photocopy laboratory notebooks and file them as a provisional patent application, because you can. There's no prohibition against that. However, in probably 90% of the time, laboratory notebooks of yours are useless to me. You can look at it and see your invention brightly lined on the pages, and I can look at that and see scribbles and words that I can't understand. So be sure you focus on clarity as well as content. In this particular provisional patent application, there are some areas where I feel should be expanded upon if this were going to be converted into a utility patent application, or better yet, back at the time it was originally filed. For example, referring to the figure at the top of the unnumbered figure at the top of page 4, there are a number of steps that are unclear and structures that are unclear. The basic concept that the provisional is seeking to convey is fairly clear. It's a valved closure device carried by the distal end of an introducer sheath to valve the arteriotomy following the procedure. However, the arrow patch port patch points to what appears to be an annular ring surrounding the introducer sheath. There's no indication of where the leaflets are, how the leaflets reside when the ring is attached to the sheath, whether the leaflets extend proximally or distally, how they're attached to the ring, and other details, how they're retained on the ring, or how the ring is retained on the introducer sheath, and how the valve or the ring are released from the introducer sheath when the time comes to seal the arteriotomy. These are not subtle, and there may not be an exact answer at this point, but I would expect at the time a provisional patent application of this type were filed, you would at least make reasonable guesstimates and articulate what those are in the provisional patent application. There's very little disclosure on the actual patch, which is a fundamental component of this invention. The overall context is well described, but I would anticipate a series of drawings on the patch itself. For example, it appears clear that it requires, or at least utilizes, an annular support structure of some type to surround the distal end of the introducer sheath. I would want to talk about that support structure. Is it rigid? Is it elastic? How is it retained on the sheath? Is it by radially inwardly directed resilient force? Or is there some kind of mechanism? Is there active retention and an active release, such as a pull wire or an inflation conduit? So there's the annular support. Then there are the leaflets or the occluders that are attached to the support. This disclosure talks about 2. However, I could design one of these that has a single leaflet, or 3 or 4 or 10. So this is a circumstance where it would be a good idea to disclose alternatives so that you can support alternative claims down the road. The patches somehow in these drawings appear to extend proximally along the sheath. Therefore, once the sheath is withdrawn through the patch, those leaflets must progress distally against the flow of systolic blood to magically seal and prevent blood loss. It's difficult to see how that was intended to be accomplished in this circumstance. The leaflets are described as elastic. However, the elasticity and the percent elongation would have to be astounding in order to surround the sheath as shown in the figure on the top of page 4, and then under their own resilience relax down and occlude the opening and still overlap and prevent blood loss. So I would think that in a provisional patent application of this type, I would want to discuss that concern, because it's a clear concern, and discuss potential alternatives without making a commitment of which one we might want to use. In summary, I think it can be valuable to start with the drawings, place them in an orderly sequence that allows you to describe the story of what is the invention and how it works, and then go back and through each drawing, break it down into components and discuss each component one at a time. And when you come to each component, discuss alternatives that might work. You don't have to commit that they do. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work, you just don't need to claim it down the road. But reasonable speculation is a positive thing. And so you also want to describe a genus, if you can, for each component, as well as a series of species. If you walk through the patent application process in that manner, you can produce an organized document that systematically goes through the device and doesn't leave out or skip over features that you forgot to include.